Story 1. When I was a little girl, my bedroom was always very cold, no matter what the thermostat for the house was set at. Our house was a new construction. In other words, our family was the first to inhabit our home. I recall so clearly that when I was growing up, I always felt as though I was not alone. So much so that I began talking to whatever it was. At times I would feel something brush my arm, but of course there was nothing or no one there. I never told a soul about this. I just dealt with it. Many years later, my best friend had some friends over at her house to hang out. One of the guests claimed to be psychic, and she was doing complimentary readings for everyone. When I sat down and did the card thing, she required me to look into her eyes, and she said, "You must stop speaking to the spirits in your bedroom." I freaked out. I was embarrassed, and I was crying. I got scared. Like I said, I had told no one, including my best friend. The psychic said that they were not necessarily bad spirits, but that I shouldn't encourage this. She advised me to go home, rebuke the spirits in my room. I did as she advised. Not long after that, I moved out of my parents' house and got my own place, a couple 1,000 miles away. And that place is not haunted. Story 2. He's Here. Several years ago, I was employed at a long-term care facility as a nursing aide. I worked nights, so I always felt a little creepy walking down the dark halls alone. Because of that, our charge nurse advised us to pair up and do our rounds together. One night, myself and a fellow coworker were doing our 2 a.m. rounds. We made it to our last room, which was an elderly woman in the room by herself. It was a 2-bed room, but no one ever lasted in the other bed more than a month or so, for some strange reason. The elderly woman in that room would always just scream and grab onto you when we were changing her and changing her bed. She never spoke a word. I had worked with her for over a year, and I never heard her say as much as hello. On this particular night, we had finished our last resident, and we went into her room to clean her up and change the linens. When we went into her room, we closed the door, but left it slightly open so we could hear the nurse if she started walking the hall searching for us. Once finished, we both cleaned the room and proceeded to walk through the door. As I reached for the knob, it wouldn't turn. It was as if the door was locked, but there were no locks on any of the resident doors. I pulled again, and no luck. It wouldn't budge. We both looked at each other and was kind of perplexed. I decided to call the nurse's station and tell the nurse to open the door for us, because it seemed to be stuck. Just as I touched the call button, the temperature changed completely. Mind you, this was summer, and this resident didn't like to run her air conditioner in her room, so it wasn't on. But suddenly the room went from nice and pleasantly warm to freezing. My coworker was standing there, just as spooked as I was. It was like a scene from a horror movie. While looking at each other stunned, the resident looked straight ahead and said, "He's here. He's in my room again. Can you feel his presence?" When she said that, myself and my coworker nearly knocked each other down trying to run into the resident's bathroom. This lady had never spoke a word the entire time I had been employed at this facility. And now, suddenly, she spoke complete sentences. About 5 minutes later, the nurse steps in looking for us. She finds us huddled in the bathroom, looking scared to death. We tell her about the door, and she frowned and showed us that it wasn't locked because she walked right in. We walked out and felt like complete idiots. As we did our final rounds that morning, we left the door open completely. At the end of the shift, the nurse walked us to our car and told us about what happened in that room. She said a few years ago, that resident's husband died. At around 2 a.m., he had been her roommate. She said that right after he died, employees spoke of the door mysteriously locking on them and the room becoming completely cold. After hearing that, I became frightened completely. I put in my resignation a week later. I just couldn't get over this. To this day, that incident still freaks me out. Story 3. Lilacs. My husband came home after an evening shift as a security officer at the local copper mine. I said, "Hey, you smell like lilacs, and you're cold as an ice cube." To which he responded, "Do I? Am I?" Then he told me a story. One building on the site had been a school in the 1800s, and this school was on his rounds. After he got through with his rounds, his buddy asked if he had met the lilac lady yet. They asked if he had smelled lilacs when he was in or around the old school building. Yes, he said, he had smelled the lilacs when he was there. That is when they told him about the school teacher, whose ghost is still there. And you can tell she's around by the heavy scent of lilacs that fill the air. He tried to tell her that her students were now all gone and that she could go also, but it didn't help. So when he could feel her and smell the lilacs, he started singing, "Hello, Dolly," and she would start to leave immediately. I guess she didn't like his singing. Some nights he would come home, and I would say, "You met the lilac lady tonight, didn't you?" And he would say, "How can you tell?" He always smelled of lilacs each time he had met her. There's another building on the site that had once been ironworks. He was warned that if you ever hear noises coming from that building, just pass on by and check it later. Guards that failed to heed that warning were often thrown across the room by someone they didn't see and sometimes injured badly. Can you imagine showing up to the hospital and saying, "A ghost threw me across the room"? Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the stories. If you did, give me a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. I really do appreciate it. Thanks for listening. Bye.